Okay. Good evening, everybody. I'd like to welcome members and officers to this Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting and hope you've had an enjoyable summer. Welcome anyone watching online via the North Herts Council YouTube channel. Before the meeting starts, I'd like to invite the committee clerk, James Lovegrove, to explain how proceedings will work and to undertake a roll call of those attending online.
Thank you, Chair. So yeah, can I just confirm that Christine Crofts is in attendance and can hear us and we can hear her?
Yeah, present. Good evening.
Thank you, Christine. And there are no other officers in attendance remotely this evening. Rules of debate. If a member wishes to speak, they should use the speak button located on the microphone unit in front of you. The microphone will light up green and the chair will be alerted of your request to speak. When the chair invites you to speak, your microphone will be made live and will turn red, at which point you can speak. The normal procedure rules in respect of debate and times to speak will apply. Voting. When requested to vote, voting will be via the yes, no, abstain buttons on your microphone unit. Details of how members voted will be shown on screens around the room, and the result will be visible on the YouTube stream. In the event of a tied vote, the chair will have the casting vote. Are there any questions? No, back to you then, Chair.
Thank you, James. Item 1, apologies for absence. I've received no apologies for absence. Are there any apologies? Item 2, the minutes of 18th of June and 22nd of July 2024. I propose that we take as read and approve as a true record the minutes of the meeting held on the 18th of June and the 2nd of July 2024. Can I have a seconder, please?
Yes, I'm happy to second.
Yeah. Any comments? Okay, we'll take a vote on that then, please.
Thank you, Chair. That motion is carried.
Okay, item 3, notification of other business. No other business has been notified. Item 4, Chair's announcements. In accordance with Council policy, this meeting is being recorded. The recording will be available both on the Council's YouTube channel as well as on the Council's ModGov site alongside the documents from this meeting. Members are reminded to make declarations of interest before an item. The detailed reminder about this and speaking rights is set out under Chair's announcements on the agenda. For the purposes of clarification, 4.8.23a of the Constitution does not apply to this meeting. Therefore, a member may leave the room during the debate and consideration of that item and be able to vote. However, please be mindful of the business on the agenda and wherever possible at an appropriate point in the proceeding. Leave at an appropriate point in the proceedings. Community Governance Review. The Council resolved to commence a Community Governance Review for the whole district, which focuses on parish level arrangements. The first stage of the review is to consult, and the Council is inviting residents, parish councils, and any interested parties to have their say on current arrangements, as well as suggestions for future arrangements via a survey which is open until the 7th of October. There is a dedicated webpage on the Council's website titled Community Governance Review, which includes a link to the survey. You will note that you have some posters in front of you. We'd really appreciate your help to promote the review by displaying them in any community buildings or notice boards that you may have access to. Item 5, public participation. We have no public participation at this meeting. Item 6, urgent and general exception items. There are no urgent or general exception items. Item 7, called in items. There are no items have been called in. And item 8, members' questions. No questions from members have been received. Item 9, we move to the Community Survey Round 2 results, March to May 2024, with Councillor Daniel Allen to present.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. As you may remember, we ran our first ever digital resident survey last year, working with our resident engagement supplier, Zen City. Thinking behind going digital was that it would enable us to go out to residents more frequently to obtain their of-the-moment views, versus the previous phone surveys, which were opinion research services used to run for us, which were run every other year. Last year's first digital survey became our baseline for future survey results comparisons. Zen City have now run a second survey from March to May of this year, which means we're now in the position to make a direct comparison with those satisfaction results. There are 4 things to bear in mind with a digital survey. First is the sample size, which aims to be representative of North Herts' population. The sample size is small, 599 residents. Research shows that satisfaction levels in digital surveys tend to be lower than those gained from phone surveys, as the phone survey interviewer has more time to build a relationship and add context and detail to each question. It's not designed to be an official consultation, but instead capture a snapshot of residents' feelings at a given point in time. Zen City's digital survey is just one of the ways we receive feedback from residents and should be reviewed in context alongside other channels during the same time period, e.g. councillor surgeries and the complaints results, which showed an 8% decrease in the number of complaints received by ourselves and our contractors. We also take it in mind in context with forums and the consultations run on specific projects. I won't take you through all of the detailed results in the reports and spreadsheets as you've had them sent to you. The highlights: a 3% improvement in resident satisfaction scores in waste collection, street cleaning, trust levels, value for money, and how we involve, consult, engage, and listen to our residents. Our residents continue to be satisfied with North Herts as a place to live at 74%. 2/3 or 66% of our residents would recommend North Herts as a place to live. The Royston resident satisfaction levels have improved by 10% since round 1 of our survey. 46% of those surveyed trust North Herts Council. This has improved 3% since last year, with Royston and Southern rural residents' trust levels improving by 12% since our last survey. This is also significantly higher than the latest Office of National Statistics Trust in Government report. I think that is all I want to say at the moment. You've had the report, you've been able to go through it. That's where I'll leave it for there, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. And we've also got Christine Crofts online for any questions. Are there any questions? Okay, Councillor Claydon.
I'm just wondering, I noticed in some areas, one of which Daniel mentioned, Royston is a little bit of an outlier. And also in the report itself, it seems like it's got a little red exclamation mark next to it. Just wondering whether that's significant and what we should understand by that.
With your permission, Chair, I'll pass that over to Christine to answer about the red exclamation mark.
Yeah.
Sorry, do you mind just pointing out exactly where that is, just so I can find that in the report?
Yeah, of course. So it appears on, I think, essentially every page of the report where it shows results. So, for example, on page 40, 41, and so on of the pack, next to Royston, where it's separated by area, there's a little red exclamation mark in a circle, and it appears on all of them. It seems to.
If I'm totally honest, I don't know why that's been included. I'm not sure why that's there, so I'd need to check that and get back to you. I'm really sorry.
Okay, no, that's fine. It's just because I noticed that in some areas Royston seemed like it was standing out, and I just wondered whether there was a connection between those two
Yeah,
things.
I'm hoping it's because of the increases, but I will triple check and let you know.
Okay, thanks.
Any further questions? Councillor Winchester.
Thank you. I really like the notion of a digital survey, but it is excluding a significant proportion of our community who are not digitally literate or have digital access. And I wondered if there were any other engagement activities planned to canvass people in person or through other routes.
Thank you. Yes. With the digital survey, as we said during the presentation, it is just one of the ways we receive feedback from residents, others being councillor surgeries, our complaints system, and when we deal with forums and consultations on specific projects. We also all have our contact details available for residents to contact us via the council's website.
Okay.
There is a difference between that's sort of a push and a pull. There's reaching out to people who have no particular reason to reach out to us because they have a problem that needs solving, and there's reaching and making ourselves available Those seem two different kinds of channel to me. So I just would like to, encourage other proactive ways of sampling people who would not otherwise be contacting us, because that's essentially what the digital survey is doing. I know a digital survey is cheap and easy to do though, so I do completely understand why you're doing it.
Okay, Councillor Allen.
Christine can respond to that. And would it be possible, Councillor Winchester, for you to move your microphone down a bit so we can hear you a bit better?
Sorry, is that better? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, actually. And I think that's probably one of the drawbacks of using Zen City for the digital survey, because it's owned and managed by them, if you like. Whereas when we do our consultations, we ensure that that link is shared in the council reception so that anybody that maybe doesn't have digital access can access it there. We provide it for surgeries so that obviously people can use maybe your laptops if they'd like to. And then we also send posters and links to libraries as well, so people without digital means can access it in other places. So I think that's a really good point, and is one of the drawbacks of doing a purely digital survey that's managed by somebody else.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Allen.
Thank you. Just to add to that, we have 2 more rounds of the digital survey with Zen City before our contract ends. The Political Liaisons Board very much felt that we should work on a new approach for surveying our residents in the future, one that is targeted and asks residents for their views on specific issues like budgeting, spending, etc., and can be open to all, including those without digital means. So we've got 2 more left with Zen City from the previous administration, and then we shall see where we head from there.
Thank you. Councillor Mansur.
Thank you. I've just got a question that arises out of what Councillor Allen just said. With respect to the 2 remaining surveys with Zen City, when do we have to use those by?
If I can ask Christine to answer that one for me, please.
Yeah, our contract ends at the end of March next year. So we've got 2 more rounds, one which is from September to November this year, and then the next round is January to March next year, and then that's the round's done and the contract finished as well.
Not on that, but on something else. And sort of going to my original question, obviously reading through the report, I remember it coming to ONS this time last year, and we had an issue with residents not being able to identify the distinction between services provided by this council and by the county council. And that seems to be a trend of which is continuing despite the best efforts, shall we say, of the communications team. So what work is going to be undertaken over the next year or so in order to better educate our residents about the services that this council in particular provides?
Councillor Allen.
If I do this as a 2-part answer with myself and Christine, we have prepared a wonderful sheet of who does what that explains what district councils are responsible for, what county councils are responsible for, what parish councils are responsible for. And if we try to do it in Letchworth, we'd probably have to add about 3 other groups as well. We have made that available on social media. We've made that available on our website, and I believe it's going to go into Outlook as well. And then if Christine can back me up on that.
Yeah, so as you say, Daniel, it's obviously been shared across all of our digital channels. It was in the last edition of Outlook magazine, literally at the start. So hopefully that was seen by people as soon as they opened it. And I know some councillors have also chosen to print it out and use it in person as well, because I've had some really positive feedback that it's really helped when they've been having conversations with residents.
So thank you, Christine. That is what we have taken from Overview and Scrutiny. We've reacted to it and we've brought that forward.
Thank you. Councillor Dennis.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think it's quite interesting looking at some of the data in here. And I think that there's clearly some lessons for councillors to take away from these survey results as well. If only 30% of people in our local areas know what we actually do, then query, are we performing our roles effectively? And is there perhaps a way that we can all step up? But the other area that concerns me a little bit is given the amount of consultations and digital communication that we push out, all of the wonderful tools that we've got at our disposal, have we really got to grips with why people across the district feel that they're not informed, and that we as an authority don't engage with the community? Because obviously we can sit here and we can list off multiple different engagement hubs that we've created, various surveys, all of the wonderful work that we do. But have we really sort of drilled down and got to the story that sits behind some of this data? And what plans have we got in place to tackle that meaningfully?
Thank you. Councillor Allen, you respond?
Quite simply, I've got complete faith in our comms team. They've been doing a brilliant job putting out the information. It's very difficult when you try and communicate your best and people don't choose to interact with you. This is why we try and approach from multiple different ways. We've been doing our best with Outlook for physical copies. We've increased the number of councillor surgeries in the last 5 years. We've increased the number of forums in the last 5 years. There has been a big increase in our interaction directly with the public, as well as our social media. Christine, would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think it's a good point. I think it is a whole council approach, because obviously we can create these comms and we can push those comms out, but I suppose it essentially it's a responsibility for all of us. And it may be that what we need to do is potentially do some more sort of focused work with potentially our citizens panel that we have to find out sort of why maybe that messaging isn't getting through and what more we can do. So I think, like you've said, Daniel, there's lots out there, both digital and in person, but maybe we just need to have some more focus sessions to find out exactly why it's maybe not cutting through with some people.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Tyson.
Thank you. Yes, a couple of things. Before I get to my question, I would like to second what Councillor Allen said about the who does what graphic, because I thought it was excellent. And anyone who's a bit of a visual learner like myself will really appreciate having that laid out as it is. And I think that it might be useful if it's affordable, to have some hard copies printed off that councillors could take away at some point and share with parish councils, etc., who they may come into contact with, and take to surgeries and so on, where they'd be a very practical aid, I think, at times. My second point, I've forgotten. The third one was the question about, following on from Councillor Winchester's question, I noticed that in the actual survey, there is a very low response to the question about North Arts Council making an effort to find out what people want. There's a slight paradox in the fact that 20% of the respondents strongly disagreed with the fact that we make an effort to find out what people want. Yeah, that was an interesting point. And yes, it leads me on to the other thing that I was going to ask of Councillor Allen is, what does the survey at this point highlight any areas that you particularly want to target for improvement?
Councillor Allen.
Thank you very much. We're going to have certain themes that we keep seeing come through. We're going to try and focus around those. The continued themes that we can't do a huge amount about are improving our roads. But the ones that we can work out are to do with housing, car parking, activities for young people and teenagers, which we can guide as opposed to actually necessarily put in place ourselves, and listening to residents. It is a big thing. So they are things that we intend to focus on with our next round.
Thank you. Councillor Wright.
Yeah, I was interested in the emerging theme around young people and teenagers, because I think young people are really struggling at the moment. We've got a whole generation of teenagers who missed out on kind of key socialization when they were younger during the pandemic, which has, a lasting impact. Money is tight in a lot of families. NHS referrals have doubled for teenage mental health issues. Exclusions, suspensions in schools have doubled. You know, there was a survey out last week that 15-year-olds in the UK report a lower life satisfaction than almost anywhere else in Europe. So, you know, I don't think it's exaggerating to say that there's perhaps a bit of a crisis with young people. So it would be good to know that that we as a council could be doing as much as we can to support that section of our community. And obviously one of the themes coming through here is about the provision of low cost free activities. I mean, we all know that youth centres are expensive, but you know, is there a possibility we can think about some low cost activities, maybe, you know, temporary pop-up spaces in underutilised areas that could be used for youth activities, perhaps working with schools more, or, you know, when we come to look at Churchgate, bear in mind the needs of young people. So I was just wondering if we have any idea of how, at this stage, how we're going to be responding to that emerging theme.
Go ahead, thank you.
We will ask that question in our next Zen City digital survey. The rest of the questions, I am very interested in answering you outside of this meeting because they aren't actually to do with what I'm doing the response on at the moment, but I will happily speak to you outside of the meeting and let you know exactly where we're heading with those.
Thank you. Councillor Bryan, did you want to come in on that too? Or?
Thank you. Could I just add something which might be a tangent to what Councillor Wright Mason has Councillor Wright has said? Work that we've been doing with the local police on priority setting, where again, there's almost no input in the democratic system from youngsters. So what we're going to do in the autumn is actually try to trial in Hitchin, because it's got police community officers who can go into schools to actually engage youngsters, tell them about the process and get them to actually sign up to the priority setting. It's that sort of model,
okay,
which I think will be an interesting one to follow on this.
Thank you. Councillor Dennis.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm very pleased that Councillor Bryant provided that additional clarity on the policy-based actions that are being taken in response to the survey reports, because I do think it is really important that we have sight of that, that those that are managing portfolios are considering the data. Obviously, it's gone to PLB, so there's been an opportunity over the summer to start having those conversations internally. And I think it's right and proper that Overview and Scrutiny is aware of what actions the executive is taking off the back of results like this. Sort of going back to the makeup of the survey, obviously 599 respondents is a really, really small sample size given the population of the district. The weighting is very helpful in achieving understanding of the data. But looking at the comparison tables between round 1 and round 2, both of these surveys covered roughly the same period of the year and they're 12 months apart. There are the changes between the results are really quite small and very, very marginal. So I think it is really critical and really important that the administration is reflecting on those areas that are scoring in sort of red and amber territory and picking and targeting the places that we can improve and have got really clear policy-based strategies for how they're going to deliver and try and drive those results up. Obviously, if all of the areas are prioritised for improvement and getting better results in the next temperature check, then none of them are going to succeed. So it needs to be prioritised quite tidily, quite neatly with the areas where we're going to be able to make the biggest impact. And I think that point that Councillor Wright picked up and that Councillor Bryant answered was absolutely fantastic and the right way to go. And it would be great if we can think as well and reflect on sort of some of the other things that this council touches on that assist and support young people, teenagers and families, given we know the pressures that they're under, and start to think about those targeted interventions and linking through to the comms team and making sure that we're really championing that. And going back to that earlier point about councillors, I think this data is a lesson to every single person in the room. When we see the council doing something good, then we should champion it. We need to connect residents to what's going on, and we probably all need to be a little bit more visible in our communities and engaging with our residents multi-platform. Sorry, that's more of a a point than a question. I'll get to a question though for Christine. So I guess based off the back of the results and where things are going, sort of what plans have you got to try and sort of support that wider program of work, and how are we going to effectively utilize temperature check style surveys moving forward to effectively capture resident feedback? And can you remind me, was there a free text box option on this survey so that we could kind of word cloud and capture some of the wider context around the answers?
Yeah, so the free text was same as last time. So how can we improve the overall running of North Herts? And that's where we drew the themes from that are in the reports. In terms of future alternatives, I think, as I mentioned earlier, obviously the Zen City contract ends at the end of March. So we're currently considering options for that period. And I think whatever we go with needs to provide us with value for money. We need to know that it will reach a wider number of residents, I think, than what Zen City can at the moment. I think we need something which is quite flexible, so we can tweak questions more than we can currently. And like we said earlier, we want to be able to reach people with non-digital means. So I think if we were able to find a survey solution that does that and that we can then market, I know that we'll reach more people because you know we are able to do that with the other consultations and surveys that we do. In terms of improving scores and actioning the feedback, I think we've touched on a few things already, but as we've said, it needs to be a whole council approach. So there's already lots happening, but I think, like we said earlier, we probably just need to potentially just get into a bit more detail with our citizens panel about maybe why some things aren't cutting through. But I feel that councillors are more visible, but we need to be more visible than we are. We've got the ward walks now, as well as the surgeries and forums. And I just think, yeah, there's more to do, but it's definitely a whole council approach.
Thank you, Christine. Yeah, if we could keep those questions a bit more direct going forward, that would be good. Thank you. Councillor Claydon.
Thank you. Related actually to Councillor Wright's question, I noticed in the report that there is some basic demographic data, and I was just wondering whether any of the answers, any of the response data has been stratified and looked at by age or gender categories.
We are able to do that with the, I've basically got a download of all of the information that I can manipulate if we need to. But in terms of what Zen City have done, it's very much, as you can see there, the headlines, but I'm able to drill down deeper into that to see, for example, some of those themes that are coming through, like the feedback about young people and having more for them to do. I'm able to see that actually that feedback came from young people as well as probably parents. So I can go into that detail if we need to.
Councillor Williams.
Do we know how we compare to other councils? Because I noticed on the front page of the report, it says that the data is there to allow us to compare against a similar a cohort of similar communities over time. But I don't see that data in the report, and I wonder if we know that.
Yeah, we have been able to see the results of a similar sized council who are using Zen City for their community surveys, but they haven't published those, so we're not able to share those ourselves. But I know from having a look at those and where we were able to compare, our scores were roughly 10% better than theirs in terms of satisfaction levels. But as I say, they haven't published those results, so I'm not able to share those myself.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bartas.
Thank you. Just looking at the data, I'd be interested to know what any thoughts are as to why there is that difference in some places around the district. For example, Letchworth, where people feel so much less informed about councillors, council services, and kind of their influence on decision making as well.
Thank you. Councillor Allen.
With Letchworth, as I alluded to earlier, we have a variety of different levels of government and charitable group and Heritage Foundation There are various different levels. So I think Letchworth can be seen slightly as an outlier on working out who does what. That would be my response as far as Letchworth goes. Christine, are you able to add anything to that?
I think that's another example of where it would be good to do a session with Letchworth residents, because obviously the Zen City survey is very much a headline snapshot. So I think that there are areas like that that we should explore going forwards.
Thank you. Councillor Manser.
Thank you. Colleagues have raised some very, very good points and have managed to identify a number of different figures and statistics. For me, I think the two of which are most concerning are the fact that 57% of our residents are dissatisfied with the way that this council runs things, and then 72% don't believe that the council provides good value for money. Now, for those of you of whom have obviously been out on the doorstep, that might not come as a surprise. It doesn't to me. But it represents quite a significant challenge, I would say, to this council. So what is the response going forward to ensure that, you know, you get that statistic, that figure down, and that people do feel like the council is delivering good value for money?
Councillor Allen.
We keep telling our story and demonstrating the good work that we do. Christine, would you like to add to that one?
Yeah, I think the other thing to add is obviously we've got our budget hub now as well. So we're really trying to use that to, I suppose, raise awareness of the situation that a lot of local authorities are in, the services we provide, ask residents for their feedback as well. So I think that will be a key tool really for getting the messages out there, but also getting resident feedback and thoughts as well.
Yeah, well, Councillor Manser, sorry.
Thank you. Would I just be able to come back on the budget hub? Because I think only around 233 residents, or 23, I might recall, have actually signed up to that. Is that more or less than you were expecting?
So the hubs are quite new for us, but just to give you an example, the Climate Hive, which was our first hub, and that's been running for about 18 months now, that's sitting at just shy of 400. So I think the budget hub at 226, I think it is now. I think that's a really good start, but obviously we've got lots more to do with it. So we're going to do some mini surveys later this year, and then we've got the full budget consultation next year as well. So I'm sure that will really drive the numbers up.
Thank you, Christine. Councillor Prescott.
Thank you. I'm trying to make this into a question rather than a comment, but I don't envy Councillor Allen, or in fact anybody in the council, because you're dealing with the same problem that advertisers around the world have to deal with all the time. It's incredibly difficult to get people to engage, and yet when they don't engage, they come back and slag the council off for not communicating well enough. I've lost count of the number of times I've spoken to people about what the council's doing and how the council has communicated, and people generally say, I don't take any notice if it comes to the council, and then they come back in the survey and say the council doesn't do anything to communicate. So I really don't envy you for that. I do think it's interesting that the Royston area is, as somebody said earlier on, is a bit of an outlier. And I'm wondering if, and I'm not taking any credit for this at all, but I'm wondering if it is because it is a more rural, aside from Royston Town, obviously, but a more rural ward. There are a lot of parish councils in the area, and there's a lot of local community engagement. Maybe that message is getting through. The other point that was well made earlier on is a business of the separation of county and district. I'm forever coming up against people saying we've got to do something to fix the roads, and you're constantly having to explain it's nothing to do with the district. But of course, I'll take the message to our county councillor. I suppose the Councillor Dennis made the point earlier on that we should all be a little bit more visible, and it's of course easily said. We're all moving around all the time, speaking to people and engaging as much as we can. But I mean, what is the council's suggestion as to how we could be, as councillors or possibly council officers, better engaged? There was a question there.
It's just about a question, yeah. Thank you, Councillor
Allen. We're trying. We're trying to make sure that people can see us. If you look back, when I was elected 6 years ago, we didn't have the number of councillor surgeries. Councillors didn't go out in public, and now we pretty much all have a monthly surgery, which is brilliant. It's a great start. Community forums are growing and are being advertised, and we try and be out there for people. Short of going out with sort of signboards on saying I'm a counsellor, we've got badges now. I can't see many ways we can go further. We've lost out now as well with the demise of local press. The Comet tried, bless them, but I think they're down to 2 reporters now. And the local press used to be a great way to communicate with residents, to let them know what was going on, but people just don't see it anymore. So we've lost that option as well. We're trying different ways to interact with people. We're doing various YouTube videos now, which are actually working really well. We've done them for recruitment recently because we've been struggling with recruitment. We've used YouTube videos to show what it's like to work here, and it's increased the people going to the page by about 600%. So we are looking at new ways to communicate with people. Some people keep telling me we need to do TikTok. I'm too old. I'm not doing TikTok. But there are various ways to communicate with people, and we are looking at all of them.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. I have one question around the Royston response rate, which is probably for Christine. It's about, so less than 8% of the respondents were from Royston. And there's only 45 in total. What can we do with Zen City for the future rounds of surveys that they do to make sure that that's increased and is more representative? You can take that if you want, Councillor Allen. Yeah.
Basically, the number of responses is targeted and collected based on the census population data. So that's the data that Zen City have. They look at the numbers and they work out the number of people that live in the different areas. Royston has a smaller population than other people. That's why it had a smaller response. The other issue is Zen City did not have as strong a response as we would have hoped for. And it would appear that some of those numbers were Royston related. We would have expected a lower number from Royston, but that is lower than we would have hoped.
Yeah, understood. I mean, there's about 15% of the councillors are from Royston, from the Royston area. So that's roughly what I was comparing to. But yeah, okay. Thank you. Councillor Dennis.
Thank you, Chair. Genuine question this time. Just looking at the 5-point plan in respect of councillors and comms, obviously the ward walks with the managing director, the leader and councillors is on there. But from my understanding of it, there isn't really a community engagement element to that, and there isn't a direct opportunity for members of the public to engage and provide that sort of direct face-to-face feedback. It's more of an internal mechanism to connect the managing director with place. So query, are the ward walks going to be looked at, examined, and is there perhaps an opportunity to connect our communities on a hyper-local ward-based level with the council's leadership?
Thank you, Councillor Allen.
As a number of the councillors in here will know and have experienced, we have been doing the ward walks. Anthony has been out with myself to most of them. Unfortunately, there was one that I wasn't able to go along to. I do apologise. And we have been dealing with members of the public on these walks. Councillors have arranged to have members of the public bring certain issues to us. And also when we've been out and about, we've had members of the public in the local area, such as when I was out with yourself, Councillor Barnes, we were looking at issues. Sorry, no, it wasn't with you. It was with Dominic, wasn't it?
Okay.
We were looking at issues underneath the bridge, and we were able to speak to members of the public about mudslides there. We were able to talk to members of the public in Letchworth about Avenue 1 and parking. We are actually able to talk to members of the public very easily, and we encourage councillors to bring their issues to us when we're out and about.
Councillor Dennis.
Great, thank you. That's really good to hear. From the communications that I've seen about these ward walks, it's been more sort of passive. The comms have gone out to say that we've done them, but there's been nothing advertising that they're going to happen so that people can directly engage. Is that an approach that's likely to change?
No, because we already have the ones where we can interact directly as far as those go with councillor surgeries. When it comes to ward walks, what we're aiming to do is go around and talk to the councillors about specific issues that are happening within their wards. We don't want to have large numbers of members of the public coming to speak to us when we're trying to do specific things with the councillors on those times. So they're interactive. Councillors can make these things happen, but no, we're not looking to advertise them in advance for many different reasons.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. Councillor Wright Mason.
Out of interest, do we know how often, or if at all, the county council do similar surveys with North Herts residents? We might not know, but
Councillor Allen.
Good question. Haven't got a clue.
Okay. Christine, any idea?
They do, I'm pretty sure it's an annual resident survey. Whether they do anything more regularly than that, I don't know, to be honest with you, but I know they have their resident survey.
Yeah, it's open now at the moment, I think.
Yes,
okay.
yes, yeah.
The fact that we don't know probably says something, doesn't it? Councillor Peace.
Yeah, I think Christine said that similar data from Zen City for other councils hasn't been published. Do we have any plans to publish this data ourselves? If we've been spending money on it, should we be making it public?
Yeah, Councillor Allen.
I'll send that one over to Christine.
Okay.
Yeah, we can certainly add it to our website because we used to do that with the district-wide survey results. So that's definitely an option.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Allen.
And I'm very happy with that. I'm pleased to have that published on the website. There is nothing here that I'm embarrassed about. All it is things that we can look at to move forward on certain areas.
Thank you. Okay, I don't see any more questions, so thank you for all of the questions. We move to the recommendation, and that is that the committee comment on and note the key findings and observations from round 2 of the community survey and comment on the approach to future surveys as detailed in section 8.7.2 and make any recommendations or comments to Cabinet. Can I have a proposer? Okay, I'll propose. Can I have a seconder, please? Yeah, Councillor Bartos. Thank you. Okay, do we have any debate? Okay, I think we've covered everything during the question. So, okay, Councillor Claydon.
Sorry. Just we haven't really discussed a great deal about sort of changes that we might make in future. I recognise that there's been some discussion about there might be changes, but not really what they might be. I think some of these questions, you know, for example, the one about the way that the council runs things, are not very actionable. And we've had this discussion because people have said, how are we going to, Councillor Munter asked the question, how are we going to address the low values of some of these responses? I think the answer is it's very difficult to know how to address them, because when the questions are stated in such broad terms, they're just not actionable. There's nothing you can do really, because you don't have the levers that you can pull to directly affect the outcomes. So just from a sort of, you know, going forward point of view in terms of thinking about what these surveys look like in future and how to get the most from them, in addition to my earlier comment about, you know, maybe looking at how different sections of the residents respond, it seems like it would be worth considering whether these are phrased in the most useful way so that we can actually get information from them, which we can turn into actionable actions.
Thank you. Thanks, Councillor Claydon. Councillor Munter.
Thank you. And I think Councillor Claydon raises a very important point, particularly when we're talking about the future. I mean, prior to us going and doing the Zen City, we obviously had the telephone surveys, and that ran for probably at least a decade. I'm sure I'll be corrected if I'm wrong. I think the fear that we have, or the concern that I have certainly, is that, you know, if the Zen City contract ends in March of next year, and we have a different scheme and a different provider of which asks different questions, then we're unable to track the progress of which has been made over a period of time. So I think it's really important that actually we identify key questions, of course, keep it flexible, but equally as well ensure that, you know, we do have something that we're able to judge from previous years to see actually whether or not we're improving or whether or not we're getting worse in certain aspects and areas.
Thank you, Councillor Munter. Any further debate? Okay, Councillor Dennis.
Thank you, Chair. I think I want to sort of look at the 5-point plan as well, and just sort of make sure, obviously, that that is a living and agile document, that we are revising and refreshing the approaches that are being taken, but also that we're not just ticking things off and saying, yes, job done, we've got regular how to have your say comms. But there's that work that sits behind that, which measures and considers how effective those particular products have been in delivering improved and enhanced survey results. And again, sort of going back to the ward walks, if it is a selective audience effectively, and we're using those mostly as kind of a PR exercise, are they legitimate and genuine community engagement activities? Is there a way that those could be used more effectively? And just understanding why people feel that we're disconnected from them as a council, I think, is going to be absolutely key to driving it up. So I think the next time that a survey like this comes to us with the accompanying papers, it would be really helpful to have an evaluation of, you know, how successful the things that have been actioned on that plan have been. And also, you know, we've done these things and we need to still deliver on the other parts on the plan. We're going to do that by X period of time. And because we've delivered these things and we think that they are effective or they're not effective, we're going to stop, start, change, introduce new things and update that plan so that it is an agile, living, breathing document that supports an enhanced engagement communication strategy and drives those improvements that Councillor Munster has sort of alluded to, that we need to make. The benchmarking point as well, I think, is absolute key. And we can learn from other industries about how they have consistency of data, even though there's flex and change in the questions. I think the 100 best places to work for survey and all of that give sort of good ideas and tips. And obviously we've got the LGA benchmarking data that sits alongside, which is useful to reference, but we need to check our own performance and we need to be using all of the tools that we've got at our disposal to do that.
Thank you. Any other contributions? No. Okay. We'll move to the vote then. Good vote now, please.
Chair, that motion is carried.
Okay, thank you, James. So we'll move on to item 10, which is the council plan 2024 to 2028 with Councillor Daniel Allen to present. And I'd just like to thank Christine before we move on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. The council plan sets out our vision and strategic priorities for the next 4 years. It also highlights some of the key projects that support these priorities. Other policies and strategies like the medium-term financial strategy and our service delivery plans will align with the council plan and provide more detail. A workshop was held in June with members of the administration as well as the leadership team and other key officers. The workshop gave administration members the opportunity to share their key priorities and aspirations for the next 4 years, as well as to reflect on previous achievements and the resources needed to deliver key projects and aspirations. A smaller working group was then formed to oversee the plan's progression. This group included key officers and members of the administration. 2 subsequent workshops were held with administration members in July to narrow down the priorities and select key projects and initiatives to sit under each priority. Officers from the policy and strategy and comms team drafted the plan during the month of August. The working group and leadership team were given the opportunity to comment on the draft before it was uploaded for the committee meeting. This draft is a plain text version. Once the content is approved, the plan will be formatted and designed. Plan's vision is working with you for a fairer, greener North Herts. Its priorities are thriving communities, accessible services, responsible growth, and sustainability. And from there, I'll pass it back to you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. Are there any questions? Councillor Munster.
Thank you. Would you be able to go into a little bit more detail as to why you selected these 4 key priorities?
Councillor Allen.
Yes, happy to. We went through various different ideas of what our main deliverables, what the things would be. We looked at other councils' plans. We looked at what we wanted to offer. We looked at national plans. And these we felt were the best things that we could deliver as a council and put in a plan that was going to be able to go through for the next 4 years.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
Yeah, this kind of follows on from Councillor Munster's question and the previous agenda item, and particularly Councillor Dennis's comments on that. I'm thinking about that lovely rich data set that we've got from our survey, and I'm wondering, did we build in any learnings and things that we want to do into the plan? Because particularly that Thriving Communities talks about how we communicate with the community, accessible services, you know, that's the thing that some of the questions touched on. And so that we don't end up with multiple different things that we're trying to achieve, because, you know, we got to respond to the survey, we have to have a plan. Are the survey responses built in to what we're going to do in this plan? That's the question.
Thank you.
I'm going to pass that one back to my officers, if I may. Or forward. Or forwards.
The specific responses from the survey aren't kind of reflected in this plan, but in terms of the themes and the projects and the initiatives that sit underneath them, and having also our team have also reviewed those survey results, I would say that there's definitely projects and initiatives in there which would look to fulfill some of those areas of kind of issue within the community survey results. And then also just to note that the projects and initiatives that are under each of these priorities, that's not kind of everything that we're going to do under each of those priority areas. It's kind of the key things that the administration really wanted to highlight are going to be taking place over the next 4 years. And there'll be more detail provided in service delivery plans, where I suspect some of those kind of survey responses will be picked up in more detail. But there's definitely things in there. I know we were talking earlier about provision for young people and stuff. There's definitely projects in there that kind of they'll fit some of those kind of areas. Yeah.
Councillor Allen.
To follow that up, if you have a look at accessible services on the plan, you'll see that the digital strategy covers a lot of the items there, particularly about access to the council and the councillors.
Thank you. Councillor Dennis.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Just following on for that, I wanted to pick up on accessible services. The box on page 79 seems to have a really heavy focus on digital accessibility. And again, sort of looking at the plan for over the next 4 years, there's a lot of stuff in there that's either relying on contractors and service providers, or again, links through to digital. I just want to ask really, what are we doing to ensure that those that don't have digital access or digital literacy are also supported, and to make sure that those times when it's not appropriate to interact digitally, how are people going to access the council, and have we captured that in our thinking?
Councillor Allen.
I will go over to Georgina on this as well. What I will point out is we've reopened the council offices as one of the best ways that people can directly talk to us, especially if it's specific things in person they don't want to have online. We are available via telephone. There are still ways to contact people there. We're available, as we mentioned before, when we go out into the community, when we go forward and have our councillor surgeries, when we have our forums, and all of our details are available for people to contact us as well. Would you like to follow up, Georgina?
Yeah, I was just going to say, it does kind of note that we recognise not everyone has access to the digital services. And just kind of in addition to what Daniel said, whenever policy team have something to review that's to do with kind of consulting or people engaging, we always flag up if we think there's kind of a barrier there for people that can't use digital services. So I'm sure there's kind of other ways that will be picked up, but it's definitely picked up when we do reviews of policies and projects.
Thank you. Councillor Prescott.
Thank you. I wonder, in the 4 priority areas, and I'm scanning them now, where does it mention anything about local business, local employment? You talk about thriving communities. It doesn't seem to be any mention of thriving businesses, which of course will employ lots of local people.
Councillor.
Question.
Yeah, Councillor Allen.
No, that's brilliant. Investing in communities, shaping communities are the two main things to go with that. These are overarching and we'll work on, but again, I will pass over to Georgina.
So the bits about businesses are primarily under the responsible growth priority. So the responsible growth priority kind of covers both development and then it also covers economic growth as well. So there's bits in there about the town centre strategies and the economic development and tourism strategy and how those will set out the approach to town centres and to engaging with businesses and that kind of thing. So yes, it probably could that there's quite a lot of projects in here which could have gone under multiple priorities. And we were kind of conscious of that when we were drafting it, but to kind of avoid it becoming longer and longer, we sort of just tried to pick one area for everything to sit under.
Yeah.
I think we miss a trick if we don't. I mean, talking about town centre policies and engaging with businesses, it's fine. But there are an awful lot of businesses that are nowhere near the town centres. And it's a win-win in the sense that if the businesses do well, they employ more people and people do well. And I would just hate to think that we've overlooked that for whatever reason, when perhaps we could focus, because I really, honestly, I'm reading the whole thing here. There really isn't much of a focus on business.
Ultimately, yeah, Daniel can go, yeah.
To do with business, Councillor Prescott?
Now that's a good question. I'd like to talk to you about it because I think there are things that can be done, but that's not for here.
Sure.
Take that.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Munster.
Thank you. With respect to the plan, I know that it is judged against council delivery plans and other policy documents, etc., which to us as councillors, particularly on the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, we know where these documents are located. I'm thinking more as a member of the public of whom sees this council delivery plan and then in a year's time wants to know, well, actually, what progress has actually been made against this plan? So what are your plans effectively to ensure that, you know, we members of the public are aware of how the council is performing against the plan?
So we will review the plan when we're asked to. That could be on an annual basis. I don't know what we'll be doing to kind of publish any information about kind of the measures and where we've got to with those. But it's something that we can talk about with the working group and probably with comms maybe.
What I would point out is it is strategic priorities. And I am very happy to bring this back to Overview and Scrutiny, have them look at it on an annual basis, should they wish to see how we are doing against our local plan.
Yeah, I think that's something we should consider. Councillor Munster.
Obviously, the local government sector is under an awful lot of pressure. You know, we've got a new government of which is implementing a large number of changes, some of which have been proposed today. What challenges do you as an administration feel that this council faces, other than, I'm looking at Mr. Cooper here because I know finance is obviously the biggest one that we face, but what are the other challenges of which we face in order to deliver for our residents?
Councillor Allen.
Relative to the local plan?
Council plan.
The council plan.
What are some of the challenges to delivering the plan, I suppose, is the question.
Challenges to delivering our plan. Finance is obviously one of them. And we are always looking at ways to make sure that we are spending the council's money in the best possible way. And having a document like this means that we are able to then do that. It means we can move forward with it. I'm going to pass over to Georgina if you have any thoughts on major worries ahead of it.
It's working, yeah. I don't think I can comment any further than you've commented. I think you've probably covered off the main challenge.
Thank you, Councillor Albert. Do you want to?
I mean, I wasn't going to sort of contribute to the debate, but I mean, I think, two things really. One, which is the council delivery plan, is the document that sits underneath this, and clearly it is making sure that the council delivery plan reflects the kind of key aspects of the council plan, in order that you can actually then judge how we're doing. And I think one of the key points that the Scrutiny Committee in its last term, and I think you chair were one of the main proposers of that, is actually making sure we have got a really focused council delivery plan, and it's there that's able to you're able to make those judgments on performance in looking there. Clearly, not everything is easily measurable, as we know, but that council delivery plan that sits below that I think is a really important document that helps reflect what's and will in the future reflect what's in the council plan. Obviously, going forward, I mean, as colleagues have already touched upon, resources is a huge issue. But it's not just financial resources, it's staffing resources, it's the capacity to deliver. And I think those are the areas that the administration and the previous one has looked at in terms of what things that we can do to help grow our own staff, to make sure we can recruit and retain staff in order to be able to deliver on what are a large number of kind of key projects going forward. And I think those are clearly the critical areas. We all know that the challenges around the local plan and the master plans and those things, and we've had those come through full council. I mean, obviously, I think the importance there, and making sure that it perhaps is reflected certainly in our economic development strategy, which I think will be a really key document for the way we support businesses, and not just businesses in the towns, but our rural economy as well. And I think, so it is about our towns and villages and so on. And that economic development strategy, which has been developed, I think is a really critical piece of work, which then, and the tourism strategy that sits alongside it, will be something that I think will be hugely valuable, and certainly one that we would want, I think, to get really some all councillors, but obviously Scrutiny input into that economic development strategy as it comes through, because I think that really is those are the sort of things that help to put the flesh on the bones of a council plan. The council plan, unless you want it to be war and peace, is by the nature of it is going to be something of this sort of kind. It's the things that sit below it and the strategies that one of the things you picked in there, the homelessness strategy. Really important area. We've got a lot of young and other homeless people around the district at the moment. How we deal with that will be really critical. That's in there, but you'll want to see what the detail is of that. That's obviously not in this council plan, but the homelessness strategy, developing one and making sure we've got that there that councillors and Scrutiny can comment on, is also then critical. So I see some of these things that are referred to in here, and as those larger documents are developed, will then be really important. And yes, of course, it will be vital to make sure it's no point doing all of these things, and then we need to make how we communicate those things, working with our comms colleagues, making sure stuff's on the website, making sure councillors have access to it, and obviously making sure we've got a responsive website you can go and look at how the council is performing. Particularly, it'll be important as we go through in seeing how the council is performing, for example, on the new waste contract as it comes through next year. These will be the sort of challenges that we'll have. So there's lots of things that sit below this, I think, Chair, that is not in this document, but I'm sure that Scrutiny will want to look at as those things are developed and come through.
Thank you, Councillor Albert. Councillor Tyson.
Can I just pick up on that? Can we not recommend then that in this plan there is some sort of explanation of how all these things sit relative to each other? Because you have just said there are a lot of things that sit below this, but the reader of this plan won't know about that. And we've already heard from experienced councillors referring to the wrong document when they meant this one. And it is a, I think we're in peril of creating a massive muddle here in people's minds with all these different references. And it would be good to have an explanation or a diagrammatic explanation perhaps of where they all fit in together. The other thing was I've got 3 just quite sort of low level comments or questions on. So yeah, sure. Yeah. All right. So the first one in the sustainability box on page 79 is the reference that says we've set goals to become net zero. And it just made me wonder whether we shouldn't be more precise about what that really means. Is there capacity to add a footnote to that to say what our definition of net zero is in this context and how we are working to achieve that?
Okay, Councillor Allen.
I can pass that one over, but I will keep reiterating strategic document to give guide, then the other bits will come underneath. And people can react to that. Yeah, that is the whole point of the Pack Council plan. If I pass over to Georgina, I do think having the list available on the website right by the council plan saying where you go from there is brilliant. We'll also have a QR code on physical copies where people will be able to see.
Okay, thank you. Regina?
Yeah, we can look at adding a sentence to explain what net zero means. Yeah.
The next question was, in the follow-on section on page 82, accessible services. Under providing key services, we've got the fact that the new waste collection contract will provide you with more opportunities to recycle. Could I just ask how that provides more opportunities to recycle?
Oh, yeah, I'll take the expert on this one. Go on, and I'll pass this over to Sarah Kingsley.
I think it's a bit of a tricky one to explain in a document like this, but obviously we are introducing soft plastics into your recycling, but also because you're getting an extra bin, so you're getting an extra bin for your fibre, which is your paper and your cardboard, actually the volume that you have for recycling will increase overall. So but it is the soft plastics in terms of the additional material.
Yeah, so it really is just the soft plastics that will be the additional item. Okay, and then finally, there's just a little language issue in the towards the end. Oh God, where's it gone? In the how we will reach you section on page 85, in person at our monthly councillor surgeries and area forums, implying that the area forums are monthly. If we just inserted the word our area forums there, that would probably correct that somewhat misleading thing there.
Take that as read. Thanks, Councillor Tyson. I have one question, zooming way out again. It's a very broad plan. There's a lot of initiatives in it. As a guide to action in terms of these new priorities, are there things that we are going to stop doing or do less of?
Question. Really good question, Matt. Off the top of my head, I'm going to pass over to Georgina and say I can't think of a good answer to that question now, but I will happily get back to you.
Yeah.
Can you think of a good answer now?
No.
Okay, that's fine. Right, it just does a good job of covering like lots of bases, but it's just if we're talking about priorities, then they should be priorities rather than, that's my view. Everything's a priority, exactly. Yeah. Okay. Are there any further questions? No. Okay. In that case, we shall move to the recommendations, which are that Cabinet review, that overview and scrutiny recommends to Cabinet, I guess. Reviews and recommends the approval of the council plan to full council, Appendix A, with the 4 new council priorities as outlined below: thriving communities, accessible services, responsible growth, sustainability. and to delegate authority to the managing director and leader of the council to approve any minor amendments to wording required as a result of the design process. I'll propose that. Can I have a seconder? Yeah, Councillor Tyson, thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any debate? Yeah, Councillor Claydon.
Can I just ask a quick question of clarification? In terms of what are we simply recommending that this goes to full council, or are we actually commending the plan itself?
Good question. I think we're just recommending that it goes to cabinet to then go to full council.
Yeah, do you want me just to
Yes,
clarify?
please,
So yeah, it's a recommendation it's a referral to cabinet, and then cabinet will refer it on to full council for final approval on the 19th of September. So yeah, 2 weeks time.
Approval for it to go through that process.
Yeah, and you can provide comments as you've done in the questions. If you have any debate now, you can provide any further comments, which will be taken on board by cabinet.
Yeah.
Who then make that final decision to refer it on to council with or without scrutiny's input.
Thanks for the
Or
clarification.
amendments as well, if anybody wants to put one. Yeah. Okay. Councillor Dennis.
Yes. Thank you, Chair. I want to start by saying thank you to the officer team and to colleagues who worked on this over the summer, again in a very short space of time, as seems to be the thing with coming up with council plans. I'm sure going forwards we'll be able to look at that and maybe plan a little bit better so it's less of a rushed process. I think to have produced a document of this type within that time period with the constraints that you've had as well is good. But for me, it almost feels, as Councillor Tyson was making very valid points about, that it's not quite finished. We're not quite there yet with things. So for example, if I were a resident, I could look at this and go, okay, so you've got these 4 priorities and you're telling me how you're going to deliver them. But how do I know what that looks like? What does thriving community actually mean? There's a lack of tangibility in that space. So it might be worthwhile kind of seeing if we can pin down short, snappy definitions for what we mean by thriving communities, responsible growth, sustainability, accessible services. And then you've got that table on page 79 that effectively goes, and these are some of the things that sit underside that. It unpacks it a bit more, and you've got the policies that hang off things. The fundamental purpose, first and foremost, of a council plan is to be the overarching strategic framework that sets everything that the council is going to do over the defined term of the plan. Effectively, it's a parent policy document off of which you are then able to hang other policies and strategies, and it's supposed to inform the council delivery plan, the medium-term financial strategy. Those are productivity tools, effectively, and reports that track our progress. There's a lack, I think, as well within the plan as it stands, of some of those hard deliverable targets. There are some things within this document that we know we want to deliver within a specific timescale, some that we've already committed that we are going to be delivering by a particular deadline. So where we know that we've got those hard stops, I think it's really important that the council plan does actually reference that. It gives our residents certainty. It shows our promise and our commitment to the communities and to the people that we serve. And it also gives us that benchmark that we can assess our performance against under utilising the council delivery plan. So reference back to Councillor Tyson's question about net zero. We've made the commitment to net zero. We've got policies in place. We should be putting the year that we're going to be achieving that in there. And if for some reason we're falling behind on our delivery, then we need to be open, honest and transparent and explain that probably before we issue a revised date within this plan so that we're ahead of the curve and objection handling and thinking about the impact that actions have based on the community survey results. So overall, I think it's a good document. It's a good place to start. But for me, it doesn't quite feel like we've got it all the way there yet in terms of it being a really strong, really solid strategic prioritization setting document that's going to help our officers and our colleagues set priorities for their competing work streams. I'm still concerned that in some areas there's multiple large-scale projects and deliverables that need to be ongoing. but we've got the human resource challenge there, we've got the financial resource challenge there, and we need to make sure that we are thinking very carefully about whether we're setting ourselves up to fail by putting too many promises into this council plan. And if there might be certain deliverables that we know we want to deliver because they fall under the broad how we're going to create a thriving community type space, but is it wise to commit to them in this document at this point in time? Realistically, are they going to get done in the 4 years? So I think, maybe take it away and have a bit of a think and make it a bit more strategic.
Thank you, Councillor Dennis. Councillor Munster.
Thank you. Well, could I just first of all echo the comments of Councillor Dennis with respect to the work of which has been put in by officers. Thank you very much to Georgina, to Ellie, to Ruben. It's very nice to be able to put, faces to names after such a long time of seeing it on various policy documents. And, having had to work with the new administration over a very short period of time, it's very impressive, and it's quite a bulky document. There are a number of points that I wish to raise. I think it's really important, following on from what Councillor Tyson said, this is obviously a document of which is intertwined with a whole host of different documents, not least the council delivery plan and the medium-term financial strategy. And I think that contained within this plan, there should be a diagram and an explanation as to the process of policy making at the council and how this fits in to the overall scheme of things. Because as it has been mentioned on numerous occasions tonight, it is an overarching, it is a strategic document. I think that it is important. This is, of course, the administration's plan. They need to be judged against that, both by overview and scrutiny, by full council, but equally as well by our residents. And that's why it is important that actually we have a review of this plan, I would argue, every year. It would be very good if we could have the leader come back either to overview and scrutiny or to full council to effectively say what progress has been made with respect to the priorities on this plan. And having reviewed a number of other council plans from a variety of different authorities, both in Hertfordshire and elsewhere, something of which is present within those plans are the challenges of which councils face. We've heard, of course, the challenges as to regard to local government finance. We've heard challenges with respect to staffing. It would be a very good idea, and it would, I think, set the scene better for our residents if those challenges were to be more pronounced and more visible within this document. Having had a look, for example, at the Hertfordshire County Council council plan, there is a separate section of which lists the challenges. And I think perhaps that might be something of where both officers and members take a look at and see whether or not that's something which might be relevant to be included on this council delivery plan. And of course, we are just one cog in the machine that is North Hertfordshire. We have the county council as our upper tier authority. We have parish councils below us. And of course, we have a variety of different community groups and charity groups and stakeholders as well. And it would be nice for those, for that stakeholder relationships and the importance of that to be reflected a little bit more within this document. But of course, as I said, this is the administration's document, it's the administration's plan, and it is what, if it's adopted at full council later this month, they will be judged against.
Thank you, Councillor Munster. And I think Councillor Andrew already mentioned that we'd be happy to bring it back annually, so we'll take that one. Thanks for your other points too, though. Councillor Wright Mason.
Yeah, I have a much smaller point compared to that. Just a very small point. It's sort of tangential to the document, which I think is very good. Obviously, it makes a big point about how we can involve people, and as we know from the surveys, that's clearly a big priority for people. Just a small thing, the link to the Citizens Panel web page is very sparse. I think it's on page 86 is the link. It's about 2 or 3 sentences, and I just think it might be a very quick and easy win just to sort of explain more what they are, maybe have some pictures, and I think that might have some goodwill, because clearly people, have that as a priority.
Thank you. Councillor Prescott.
Thank you, Chair. Just really picking up on Councillor Dennis's point, and it's a point I think that's been alluded to by a number of colleagues. It's a good plan. It's a fairly hefty plan. It's clearly taken a lot of effort to get to this stage, but I think I'd like to see something approaching a KPI or 2 in there. So it's all very well to set out what we want to achieve. it would be nice to know by when we want to achieve specific deliverables, and more to the point, how we measure and how everybody else measures how well we've done against those deliverables. And it's interesting that we've had the survey at the beginning of the this evening. It would be nice, for example, to pick up one or two of the points in there and say, within 12 months or within 2 years or whatever, we want to see this metric rise from 28% to 36%, or so that we've got something by which we can measure ourselves and everybody else can measure us also. Because otherwise, it's a very detailed plan. It's great, but there's nothing anybody can come back with and say, but you didn't do that, because it's just a lot of words. If there are some genuine KPIs, and I'm not suggesting we pick one for every single area, but just some headlines, then we could go back to our communities and say, look, we said the council said it was going to do this. It said it was going to do it by then, and we've done it. Or we didn't do it, and this is why we didn't do it. So there's a story. It kind of squares the circle there. Am I explaining that particularly well?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Prescott. Councillor Bartos.
Thank you. And I think I might take a slightly different perspective to some of the previous comments to say that I actually think this council plan's really good and the substance in it is really meaningful. I think there are some really clear objectives, and I think whether or not they're achievable is something that is for members of the executive to look at. But in terms of having a clear idea of priorities and setting a vision and actually having things that are really deliverable to like individual projects, I think in that sense it's different to other council plans that I've seen, where maybe it's not so clear exactly what we're talking about in terms of the projects that sit under the overarching headlines. So yeah, that's my perspective on it.
Okay, thank you. Any other contributions? No. Okay, yeah. So, thank you. Yeah, I said echo the thanks to the officers for their work on this, and also for the members of the administration as well. I think, from my point of view, the suggestion about including a section on the challenges face is a really strong one. I would also, I think, like to see a more specific deliverables. There's a lot of sort of open-ended. It is, but there's a lot of continue and review and things like that, which yeah. But I do think coming back and reviewing it annually is quite a good idea, and we should probably put that onto the work program as well. And the other point was just in relation to the question that I raised around what are we sort of deprioritizing as a result of the new priorities. If we can give some consideration to that, that would be useful too, I think. I'm not going to propose any amendments or anything, though. I think this is fine to move forward. I'm not seeing any other contributions to the debate, so let's move to the vote on that now. So we'll take both recommendations as one.
Thank you, Chair. That motion's carried.
Thank you, James. I think we should probably take a short break because, sorry, Councillor Allen, did you want to say something?
I'm going to have to leave before the end of overview and scrutiny. It's my son's 18th birthday, so I need to chip off.
Happy birthday to him. Thanks for your time, then. Okay, we'll take a short break. I think if we come back at 9:05. Is that okay? Yeah. Great. Thank you. Welcome back. The next item is item 11, the Council Delivery Plan 2024 to 25, Q1 update, and Ian Cooper to present. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll start off at section paragraph 7.1, which provides a bit of the history. So we had a much longer council plan last year, and following feedback from this committee at the March meeting, it was substantially shortened, following some work on project prioritisation that had taken place. Obviously, sort of following up from the previous item, this reflects the kind of previous council plan, albeit the projects will probably be maintained, but it's pretty similar. But there is scope to add projects back into the council plan to reflect the new council plan, albeit let's not go back to where we were before, but there's too many projects in there. Let's make sure it's focused on the key stuff. And then at the meeting in June, we brought a paper around the performance indicators, which were then agreed by both this group and then Cabinet around what they should be, with the focus being to move away from just purely being based on the projects in the council delivery plan and looking at the council overall. So this is the quarter one update. It technically is the position at the end of June, although in reality, we try to make it more current than that. So in general, this is the update as at sort of beginning to mid-August. So the latest update we did on this was, I think, just after middle of August. We updated it for the waste contracts. The sort of type, the stuff in there relates to the sort of latest at that point on that one. Appendix A is the main document to look at. It starts off by looking at the key performance indicators at the top, and then works through the projects. For each project, we've got the key risks associated with that particular project. And then right at the bottom, we've got the 3 corporate risks, which sort of overarch. And we're sort of talking about a couple of those already this evening in relation to both money and people resources in able to deliver projects. At this point in time, all the milestones are new. They are set for this document. Therefore, they've all been achieved so far. Which is good. So I'm not going to go too much into those, but we have tried to, with fewer projects on the council plan, provide much more where we can detail around the forthcoming milestones against each project. So you'll see a much longer list than maybe we had in the past, and perhaps going beyond the current year into future years. That does mean that in some cases there aren't dates against them, but it does provide that kind of future path to how to achieve those projects. There are in the report, as set out in paragraphs 8.3 and 8.4, 5 performance indicators that are rated amber, and paragraph 8.4 provides some commentary against those about what we're trying to do to make those better. Just one comment in relation to short-term absence numbers. It states there around offering flu vaccines. In the past, we've been lucky that the Public Health at County Council provided funding towards that. We're not going to get any funding for it this year. We found out quite recently since this report was written. So we just had to do a double check around how sort of the case for doing those. But I still think it's something we would want to do, to provide staff with flu vaccines where they want to take them up and provide that funding, because even a few days saved helps us deliver a bit more. And as my usual, I was always at the meetings talk about 2 things. So 8.6 talks about idea gen and the offer that is there to get live updates or more live updates on our council projects. And then scooting back, there's a reference earlier in reports to the performance and risk management group, which, as I appreciate during the day, it's near to our meeting that all members of Overview Scrutiny and Finance Audit and Risk Committee are invited to come along and just see what we talk about. The discussions are very varied, but we do sort of go through what's on the council plan, key risks, as well as other topics like health and safety, emergency planning, and those kind of topics as well. So we'll put those invites out there to you, and we'll let you know the dates for those. So please come along if you can. I know there are a couple of questions sort of raised in advance of the meeting. Do you want me to cover those now, Chair, or do you want to ask those specifically? So the Chair asked a couple of meeting questions in advance of the meeting. One of those, both in relation to the performance indicators. The first one of them was in relation to turnover of staff and whether we had any kind of comparative data for other authorities. We don't have at this stage any comparative data for other authorities on their staff turnover. We do have some comparative data in general from the LGA, but that does include all four authority types at district level. So we'll include those that have more in-house services, which generally means those kind of waste stroke leisure will have greater staff turnover than perhaps the kind of core staff that we've got. So in that context, for me to say that we are lower than their staff turnover wouldn't say too much, but we are lower. So in that context, but we will look at if we can get some data for future around how we compare against others. I guess on that subject, we've obviously got a target of 15%. Equally, you don't want staff turnover being too low either. You don't want lots of staff turnover, but you don't want too low either. You do want a bit of new blood into an organisation as well. So, you know, our looking back at the past, we have sort of varied between sort of those 8 or 9% in some years, up to 12, 13, 14%. So we have kind of fluctuated below that level around there. And the other question was in relation to the visitor numbers for our leisure centres. And obviously, as you'll note from the report, we're doing very well against that performance indicator, maybe too well. That's because we set the target based on the previous year's target rather than what was achieved last year. So it's probably a target we need to review as we go through this year as to what the target should be, particularly next year, and maybe review a bit earlier the rest of this year as to what that target should be, because the previous contract was already doing better than that target. And we would hope that with a new contract, after it's bedded in, which is done, seems to do so quite well already, we would achieve more than that. And that's being shown by the data. I will stop there, but obviously there's a lot of detail in there. Happy to sort of take any questions on the detail of the report.
Thank you. Thanks for answering those questions as well. Councillor Manser.
Thank you. I may be a little bit late on this one, but is there any way that we can add another key performance indicator? I just note that we're talking obviously about staff turnover, we're talking about working days lost, and you know, we're referencing percentage of advertised vacancies filled in the first round. It might be useful to know and understand what the position vacancy rate is. How many positions in the council are unfilled? Because I know obviously we've got quite a number, and they're having to be filled by contractors. Is that something that potentially could appear on the next report?
I'd say it's something to look into. I think the biggest issue we've got is where the vacancies are and where they kind of put all in one team or in sort of certain teams. That's where we get the bigger issues. But something we can look into is around what the total number is, and see if that's a meaningful number and whether that actually adds context to the report. But not a good idea, but I need to sort of think about how it's going to work.
Thanks. Just to follow up on that, at a previous meeting of ONS, we discussed and recommended including KPIs on employee engagement and contractor performance. Is there still work ongoing on those topics, or you know, is this the fixed set of KPIs that we're working with?
So it's not a fixed set of KPIs in relation to employee engagement. We don't really do staff surveys at most once a year, and so therefore on a quarterly report you wouldn't see much report on it, albeit we have done a staff survey which we're now working through in terms of an action plan to communicate to staff, and certainly once we've gone through that process, we can report that back in terms of what the outcomes of that are and what we're doing about it. I think it's important we show at the same time, if we are going to be fairly infrequently, what we're doing about the results of it. In relation to contract performance, we've got some of that in there. We've got the ones in there that kind of we think are most meaningful in terms of what we can measure and how we present it. So a bit in there, but then potentially more to do. We just have to sort of make sure it's stuff that's measurable and meaningful.
Thank you. Councillor Dennis.
Yes, thank you. Just sort of, you've triggered me a little bit on staff satisfaction stuff. Absolutely have a plan for it, have a idea of what good looks like, what we're aiming for. But can I make a desperate plea, having seen what's happened in some other organisations, that we don't sort of performance manage and link that metric to reward? Because I think it's absolutely horrific in some places where bonuses, progression, personal performance targets are based on the percentage number of staff that are satisfied and the outcomes of staff surveys. That creates a really unhealthy and quite toxic workplace culture sometimes for employees. So just, go about it the right way, which I'm sure you will. But that wasn't the question I had. The question I had was sort of looking at the number of alarm calls and some of the care line data. Obviously, we just sort of report the value. It might be useful to understand at some point, perhaps if we have a presentation from care line in future, what's driving the numbers, whether it's good that we're getting that number of alarm calls, or if there's sort of an underlying story there. Is there something that might tap into as well the work that's being done around health inequalities and supporting residents? Is there a story that sits behind those numbers, and is there some action that we could take to help support people even more than we already do through the excellent service we provide?
Yeah, I think there is something we can do on that in terms of both as we go through the performance of risk management group. We have a standing invite to each of the service directors to come and present their particular area. So I think when it's kind of Joe Duffy's turn to do that, we can certainly kind of look in more detail about that and sort of look about what the performance measures can look like there. But yeah, certainly if you want to call the exec member and Caroline themselves to come and present to this committee, I'm sure that'd be something within your gift. And I can see Councillor Bryant itching to speak on that subject, I'm sure.
Councillor Bryant, do you want to?
Yes, Caroline would like to come and present to overview and scrutiny. I've had 2 meetings with David. It is very impressive, and you'll have lots of questions.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Claydon.
Thank you. Yeah, just to follow up on Councillor Dennis's last point, just again thinking about understanding these numbers a bit more. It's really good to have the trend column, but given the trend is just up or down, this could be essentially very tiny variations, which are essentially just random, or it could be some large change. I just wonder, is there any possibility of being able to see a sort of a change in numerical terms rather than just simply as a sign, so that we can sort of get a sense of whether there are any areas where there are big changes as opposed to just something like random fluctuation?
Yes, have to look into that. That's what we can. I don't want to overload the report, because we try to make it as simple as possible, but I'm sure we can. Let's see if we can do something around, making that just a bit better. Because in terms of the up and down arrows, as the bit at the top says, the up and down doesn't necessarily mean going up and down, but it's getting better or worse. So it provides sometimes a bit confusing as to how that works. Maybe we can provide some historical data just to make that even clearer. But leave that with me to as to how we can present that better.
Yeah, please do.
So on clarification then, so an upwards facing arrow means good. It doesn't mean an increase.
It means it's getting better. So it's improved. The numbers improve compared. So if if a low target is good,
yeah.
If the number goes down, then the arrow will go up to show it's getting better towards that target.
All right, I missed that.
Yeah, that's maybe.
Yeah, it is tricky. Yeah, I get
yes,
that.
it'd be good way of getting around that as well.
Okay, great, thanks.
Okay, Councillor Williams.
So I really like the layout actually. Feel to my mathsy brain, but I really like the one pagers about the projects. I think that's really clear. And I wanted to ask, I'm thinking about looking to the future, not these specific projects. So within the projects and the project delivery, how will the lessons that are learned from delivery of these projects be captured and then help inform how we do future projects to help the arrows all be pointing up?
So all of our larger projects, and these generally, some exceptions in there, but generally these are classified as our larger projects. There are a project board in place. They'll go for the whole project management process, and then when they reach the end of the project, there's a lessons learned process to that, and then that is reported back initially to leadership team. Although, as you'll see from the next item agenda, we've got a report on the leisure management procurement, so they can come to overview and scrutiny as well. So certainly we use that both to report back to our officer leadership team, but also to other project managers out in the organisation, so they'll look at and go, actually, when I'm doing my next project that's got similar to that, I can learn from that.
Councillor Manser?
Thank you. And I do apologise for not submitting these questions in advance. But with respect to the local plan review, and of course, if they can't be answered now, I'd be more than happy for them to be answered in written form. But with the local plan review, obviously, we've got a lot of changes going on with respect to planning. When can we expect to receive further clarity as to timelines on that? Because obviously, that is a major piece of work of which has quite a substantial impact on many residents in our district.
I'll be honest, I don't know any more that's on that in the kind of list there in terms of the estimated dates. I don't know when we'll get some more clarity on those, but I will contact the relevant service director and try and get some more clarity about when we'll know more.
One further question, if I may, Chair. With respect to obviously the electric vehicle charging, we've got an estimation of the 31st of December for the installation of all of the new EV charging points. This is quite a specific question, so I'm not surprised if you say I have no idea. But how many EV chargers are actually going to be installed?
I will give you an answer. I think I've got a rough number in my head, but I don't even know what answer. I'll get you the exact number.
Thank you. I just want to ask around the waste contract. So maybe, Sarah, you might be best placed to answer this. Could you clarify the situation with Electricity Depot lease assignment? Because I was under the impression from our last meeting that it was imminent, but it's ambiguous from the report whether it's been completed or not, and what the impact of that is, more importantly.
Yeah, I can confirm that it has been completed. So yeah, that's all done.
Okay.
Thankfully.
Good. Thank you. Okay. Councillor Wright.
Yeah, I just wondered, could you confirm in relation to the leisure centre decarbonisation whether you've managed to appoint the quantity surveyor?
We're currently in the process of doing that. We're appointing one through a framework. So we're literally probably about a week away from having appointed one.
Okay. Councillor Manser.
Would I be able to just come back with respect to the waste and street cleaning contract? When can we expect to see specific dates on is it IdeaGen or Pentana? I can't remember, but the system of which we've got in front of us, so that we know the key measurables, and then obviously that goes into your work as well for the implementation and the I've forgotten what it's called, but yes, yeah, the sort of the implementation phase, mobilization, I think it is, isn't it? Yeah.
So we actually have our first waste mobilisation project board meeting tomorrow. So there is a work programme in place, just to reassure you. But obviously, due to the sort of delays on the completion of the lease assignment, we haven't been able to kind of publicise those dates. But yes, the team have a plan, and as I say, the first project board is tomorrow, and then obviously that plan will start to be communicated further.
Okay, I don't see any more questions. No, okay, fine. In which case, we'll move to the recommendations, which are that the Overview and Scrutiny Committee comment on the Council Delivery Plan Q1 monitoring report, including the recommendations made to Cabinet, that Cabinet notes the progress against Council projects as set out in the Council Delivery Plan, Appendix A, including the new milestones that have been set for the current year. And 2.2, that Overview and Scrutiny Committee determine any project that they want to receive more detail on as part of the next monitoring report. I will propose that again. Can I have a seconder, please? Anybody? Yeah, Councillor Wright, thank you. Is there any debate? No. Okay. Well, thanks again for the efforts in putting the report together. We shall move to the vote.
Thank you, Chair. That motion is carried.
Thank you. And so we'll move to item 12, which is the Leisure Management Contract Procurement End Project Report. And Sarah Kingsley and Louise Randall to present.
Thank you, Chair. So as Ian has already alluded to, as part of our project management processes, we prepare project closure reports to identify the benefits and lessons learnt of projects. So this report is regarding our project to procure the Leisure and Active Communities contract, which commenced on the 1st of April. We followed a robust procurement process and we used a competitive procedure with no negotiation. This basically allowed us to have an element of negotiation with the bidders, and also allowed us to test some what are called variant bids before the final tender specification was produced. So this ended up with a 10-year contract being awarded to Everyone Active with an option to extend for up to 5 years. And it includes our new active communities element to the contract. We had a project team and a project board for the whole project, and we also utilised specialist resource in terms of consultants, leisure consultants and specialist lawyers. There were significant financial and quality benefits achieved from the project, which you'll see in the appendix, and also significant capital investment from Everyone Active as part of their bid. And obviously the council is also investing significant capital in terms of the Royston gym extension. So if I just draw your attention to the lessons learnt, there are a couple of things that we have highlighted which we think went really well. The use of specialist consultants and lawyers, although I totally appreciate that there is a financial cost to that, we feel that given the overall contract value, that actually they provided really good value for money, and they gave us a really robust specification, ensured we met our strategic objectives. And to be honest, I don't think we would have achieved the outcome we did from the procurement without utilising those specialist consultants. So I do think for a procurement of this scale, it is really, they're really useful. You know, they know the market inside out. In terms of some of the things that were more challenging, as I've said, there's the actual timeline to procure was quite challenging. But in large part, that was not COVID driven, but obviously the leisure market suffered greatly as a result of COVID. And so in essence, we had to bide our time a little bit before we pulled the trigger on the procurement to see whether the market had recovered sufficiently in order that we thought we could get a decent bids from the market. And obviously we took advice on that from the consultants that we used. In the end, because the procurement actually did run really well in terms of timelines, and we actually achieved the contract award date earlier than we had expected. So although the timeline was challenging, we did manage it, but I would have liked to have had another 6 months, if I'm honest. What else was there? We also thought that using the competitive procedure with negotiation went really well. Testing the variant bids was really valuable because then we could look at what we actually wanted to include in the final tenders and make sure that the final outcome achieved the best value for residents. In terms of communications, the Everyone Active did have a communications plan in place. I think it's fair to say there were some teething issues around the start of the contract. I think partly that was also because it was, the first day of the contract was Bank Holiday Monday, Easter holidays. And so the leisure centres were very busy. And there's not a lot we could have done about that, to be honest. Everyone Active did go into the leisure centres the week before contract start because SLL did allow them to. They didn't have to allow them, but they did allow them to. And so they did try and sign people up to their app. But obviously there's a limit to that. they also did send quite a lot of communications to existing members in advance. We know that there are examples where some members may not have received all those communications. But again, that, to be honest, some of that is probably to do with the quality of the data that SLL had on those customers, because Everyone Active could only utilise the data they were given. In terms of the comms itself, we know that people were worried about the booking system, whether people had to book. And I think we probably underestimated the scale of that in terms of how many people were worried about that and the change that that meant for the leisure centres. But I do feel that Everyone Active were very proactive in their response to a lot of those communications, and our own communications team worked really closely with them as well. And actually, when we came to the opening of the outdoor pools, I think we were a lot more prepared, and we anticipated a lot more of the FAQs. And I think by that point, things had settled down and went a lot more smoothly. But yeah, that's kind of, there's some of them, but obviously I'm happy to take any questions or comments. Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks for coming along as well on this. Obviously, it was raised as quite early on in our meetings. This is a topic that we wanted further detail on, so I appreciate that. One of the questions that I had was around the ongoing monitoring of the performance now that the project is closed. Obviously, we're moving into business as usual sort of phase, but the outcomes that we had, particularly around increasing participation, are still valid. How are we looking to monitor that?
So with the new contract, we have performance indicators which help us measure our performance against the strategic objectives for the contract. So there's it's core performance indicators which we get monthly. So they include things like total members, total casual users, total throughput broken down by specific activities, frequency of activity, and then they're broken down by gender, age, socio-economic status, etc. So we get those monthly. We also get the sort of higher level performance indicator data. So there's a lot of them. So I'll just give you a few. So there's things around customer and partner satisfaction indicators. There's customer retention data, compliance with quality management systems. There's mystery visit scores. Members should have received Everyone Active's first quarterly performance report. So we put that in MIS, but we can always recirculate that if members would like us to. So there are all these performance indicators. I would say it is early days on the new contract.
Thank you. Any other questions on the report? Councillor Manser?
Just looking at page 115 of the report, specifically the project products, it's mentioning 9 issues were recorded on the issue log. Would you be able to give us a little bit more detail as to those type of issues? Because when dealing with other contracts, it'd be just quite interesting to have a comparison.
Can you give me a moment to find the issues log and I'll come back to you?
Yeah, sure. Anybody has another question? I have one, I suppose. Yeah, I can ask one. One sec. On the communications, it says the level of concern from centre users was underestimated. What can we learn from that in terms of future projects?
Apologies, could you repeat the question?
Yeah.
I was trying to find the issue. I was trying to multitask.
Yeah, okay. On page 120, under the communications plan, it says the level of concern from centre users, particularly regarding the new booking system, was underestimated. What can we learn from that in terms of future projects, and particularly maybe the waste contract and changes there?
Yeah, I think when we spoke to Everyone Active about this, I think their view was that there were always issues at the beginning of new contracts, but it's quite difficult sometimes for them to anticipate what those issues are going to be because they're not always the same across the different contracts. So You know, because you can go from they might go from one contract to another, where another organisation has an app and a booking system, but obviously it was quite a big change for us. So I think it's probably a bit more of the early engagement and putting our heads together with the respective comms team to kind of thrash out those FAQs, which actually is something we're already doing for the waste contract in terms of the mobilisation, because as you said, we want to minimize customer contact at the beginning of that waste contract to make sure that everyone knows what the service changes are. I think it's keeping the FAQs up to date and making sure that we're pushing those out through every channel that we can. And just, I think it's really difficult to say because, these contracts don't happen very often. But I think it's just keeping on top of it. And again, if we had a longer mobilisation time, which we could do if we had a longer procurement process, it may well be that, we could think about the comms a bit earlier and plan a bit ahead of time.
Thank you. Do you have a response to the issue log question? Yes. Okay.
Sorry, it's not even been that long. It feels like ages ago since we finished this contract. So there was some issues around the Letchworth outdoor pool. So you remember, for example, that there was a community group. We talked about whether we would keep the Letchworth outdoor pool within the contract, or whether we look at options for the community to run the outdoor pool. So we looked at that. We looked at things around, whether we could run the outdoor pool all year round, as an example. There was an issue around uncertainty over the affordability of requiring real living wage. So we requested variant bids at the initial tender stage to see whether we could or could not afford the real living wage. Issues around investment in Royston Leisure Centre. So this goes back to the learner pool and the gym extension, which members will be fully aware of. But we had the gym extension already in the capital programme. And so we used the variant bids to test the business case to make sure that there was a robust business case. And we obviously also used the variant bids to test the business case for the learner pool as well. Sorry, just give you a couple more. Oh yeah, so there was one around fees and charges. In the last contract, we had a say over the fees and charges, whereas now we give the operator freedom to set their prices. So we give them more commercial freedom on the contract. And we also had to update the policy on the concessions pricing, because that was part of a wider concessionary pricing review. But I'm happy to share this issues log with the committee if that would help.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Peace.
I think it's related to your question on comms, and we've had a running theme this evening of digital inclusion and how do we reach people who aren't able to respond to us and aren't able to use apps. And I just wondered if there's any lessons to be learned by how the comms team contacted or didn't contact people who weren't digitally included. Certainly I've spoken to quite a few people who felt very excluded because they had this perception that they had to use an app when probably they didn't. But how would you reach people in the future?
I mean, I think some of that lies with the operator rather than with our own comms team, to be honest. But yeah, I mean, as I said, Everyone Active did actually go, they were in person, had staff prior to the start of the contract in the leisure centres, to try and ease the switch over. And they also had extra staff at the beginning of the contract on site to try and handle that as well. I think the messaging around whether people need to book or not we did struggle with, because we didn't really want to say, oh, you don't have to book, and then find that people actually turned up to the leisure centre and couldn't get in because they hadn't booked. So it's a very tricky balance, and I think that was quite tricky for everyone active, because obviously they're taking over a new facilities. They don't know how busy those facilities are at certain times of day, so we had to allow them a bit of time to get to know things. But yeah, look, there are lessons to be learned around comms. I think everyone active are being pretty good, though, in terms of community engagement already. I've seen them out at different stands and, across the district. And I don't think they do rely solely on digital comms, to be honest. We've also put lots of stuff in Outlook magazine ourselves as well.
Thank you. Councillor Mansell.
I think one of the reasons of why we were so keen for you to come before the committee and obviously explain how everything has gone and the lessons learned is because this is one of the major contracts that the council deals with. The next one is obviously the waste contract, which is obviously live, and you're involved quite heavily in that. Following this contract procurement, have you changed your approach or anything of which you're dealing with respect to the waste contract? Have you implemented effectively any of the lessons of which you've learned into that?
I mean, some of the lessons, although they're actually are similar. So, for example, although with waste, they use competitive dialogue rather than competitive procedure with negotiation. They're both similar in terms of allowing that negotiation with bidders. And actually, for waste, that was, as with leisure, that was really effective because, as you know, when we initially, the tender prices were pretty high, pretty unaffordable. And so obviously we had to negotiate with bidders in terms of the service design. And so that process allowed us to do that. And the same with leisure, really allowed us to sort of test those scenarios whereby ultimately we get a better value for money at the end of it. In terms of time, I think leisure, the timeline on leisure was actually more challenging than waste, or it should have been more challenging than waste, because we allowed more time for waste, but there were more complex issues with waste than there were for leisure. I think comms is probably the big one that we need to learn from. And as I say, the waste team and the comms teams across both East Herts and North Herts councils have already, drafted a comms plan that's being presented to the project board tomorrow. There's lots of plans to engage with members around those and, kind of to get two-way feedback on that, because obviously you are out there speaking to your communities. So comms will be a massive focus for the waste contract in particular.
Thank you. Yeah, and we did speak about that, didn't we, at the last meeting as well? So that's good. Okay. One last question for me. On the other considerations, it mentions about a potential extension of the contract to move it away from Easter. It also says that Easter is in the Easter holidays, so you might want to review that. But is that something you're actively pursuing, or is it just something that's too far away to worry about?
We're not actively pursuing it now, but I think one of the reasons also that we could ultimately pursue an end date to the contract that is not the 31st of March is we know that all local authority leisure contracts pretty much all end on the 31st of March. And so when we had our fairly challenging procurement timeline, that was identified as a risk to the project, because bidders obviously only have a certain number of procurements that they are going to bid for in a year, and they all come at the same time because everyone's procurement finishes at the end of March. So it was a risk to us in particular because of our even shorter timeline that we might lose bidders because of that. So I do think if we can change the 31st of March next time round and go for a September or an October start date, that there could be benefits both from the sense of not starting a new contract in the Easter holidays, but also from the market being quieter perspective.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, well, in that case, we shall move to recommendation, which is for the Overview and Scrutiny Committee to comment on and note the Leisure Management Contract Procurement End Project Report. I'll propose. Can I have a seconder, please? Yeah, Councillor Tyson, thank you. Is there any debate? Okay. All right, fine. In which case, we shall move to the vote, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. That motion is carried.
Thank you, James. We'll move now then to item 13, the Safeguarding Annual Report 2023 to 24, with Councillor Val Bryant to present.
I would like to present to you the report, which is in your papers. It gives the background to what our HG responsibilities are, and also the figures for the last year, which I hope you've looked at in great detail, and you may want to ask questions of those, but I would have to refer those back to actually give you detailed answers. Thank you.
Okay, with that in mind, does anyone have any questions? No. Okay, then we shall move to recommendations. Well, I did ask a question, but I don't know if you.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Fine. Yeah. Yeah. I assume that you weren't going to answer it because of what you just said. Okay. My question is that I've lost my question now. It was to do with the assertion that the increase in cases is to do with the increased awareness of safeguarding concerns, and how confident we can be of that as being sort of a main driver, and not that there is actually an increase in problems. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm grateful to Helen, who has produced this, and Lisa, who produced this answer. They asked this question of ECP, who are the training provider, and the response from ECP was that their chief executive agreed that the increased training does increase confidence for staff to report concerns. So the raising of awareness through robust training develops competency in professional curiosity, and subsequently, you'll see a rise in information being shared, for example, referrals. Chief Executive advised that statistical evidence is challenging. It is often seen as evidence within the organisation when training is implemented. In terms of any evidence that could be used to support the statements in the annual report, I've reviewed the feedback from the courses that ran in June and July, as the feedback includes the question, how much has your confidence, awareness and knowledge increased following the course? Attendees are asked to score the question from 1 to 5, with 5 being the highest. The feedback for this question by course is as follows. Basic child average was 4.1, basic adult average 4.5, advanced child course 4.8, advanced adult course 4.5. So for all 4 courses, the average score was 4.4 out of 5, and there were 72 responses. So we can be quite confident that, in fact, there's actually been a climate change within the organisation in confidence, which resulted in there being more reports.
Thank you for that information. Councillor Claydon.
I've got 2 questions, if I might be allowed.
Sure.
The first is on the numbers with regard to domestic abuse. I recognize the comment that points out that the numbers for children will tend to be higher than the numbers for adults because of there being, in many cases, more than one child in the same household. But the numbers for children seem to be have increased a little and then decreased from 21-22 to 23-24, whereas the numbers for adults seem to have decreased very sharply. So is there a sort of explanation for why that? Because on the face of it, that doesn't seem to quite add up.
Councillor Bryant, are you able to?
I would have to take that question back
Okay.
and give you a written answer.
Okay.
Here we are.
Yeah, I was just hoping that it was there was some explanation on that table about that. Obviously, each individual adult can have multiple children, and each time a referral is made, that frankly can obviously vary from each referral. Obviously, some parents might have 4 children who are involved in the home. It could be 1 in another occasion. Does that assist?
Well, looking in the referrals from 21-22, so this is page 125 in the table. In 21-22, there were 251 referrals related to adults and 233 for children. So that's the adults outnumbering the children, whereas in the other 2 years, there are far fewer for adults than for children. So I don't think that does explain it.
It could be that there wasn't any children for that particular adult referral.
Sure, but it's a big change in pattern from year over year. That's all I'm getting at.
Sure. Okay, we can follow that up. Do you have another question?
Sorry. Yes, I was just wondering about the people who are referring these. Is there any kind of change in pattern in terms of referrers? Are certain referrals coming more or less from certain quarters?
All staff are trained in relation to that, but obviously predominantly front-facing services are likely to be the referrers, such as housing. And in the main, I think that's going to be the vast majority of referrals will come from that team.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions on this report? No. Okay. All right. We'll move to the recommendations. Thank you for the information that you provided. The recommendations are that Overview and Scrutiny Committee receive and comment on the annual report of progress made against the Council's fulfilment of its statutory duty to maintain an effective safeguarding function regarding children, adults with care and support needs, modern slavery, prevent and domestic abuse. Note the SIAS Audit Action Plan Tracker Appendix A, and agree that sufficient and robust processes are in place at the Council for application and review of safeguarding processes, and that an annual review and presentation into this committee should continue. Again, I'll propose. Could I have a seconder, please? Yeah, Councillor Claydon, thank you. Is there any debate? No. Okay, we'll go that to the vote then, please.
Thank you, Chair. That motion's carried.
Okay. Thank you. Oh, Councillor Bryant.
I've just been reminded by Jeanette that we haven't given any figures for councillor training.
Okay.
And can I just spend a minute to talk about councillor training, because I think this is relevant.
Yeah.
The councillor training figures for 2023 were very, very low. We have made great efforts this year to offer the training in all sorts of different manners, including fast tracking before the council meeting last time. So up to date, we've got about 40 of our councillors have actually undertaken the training. All councillors have received the information they need about signing the documentation by email. But what we'd like to do is to actually aim for 100%, because we actually expect 100% of staff to have undertaken the training. I think it's one of our statutory responsibilities. So I intend to actually send that out in the next couple of days. And so if you've actually completed the training and the documentation, well done. If you haven't, please can you do it? And let's get to 100% figure. And then next year when we track it, in fact, we'll check that it's 100%.
Did you say what the current completion rate is? Sorry.
I can, just a second. It's 27 councillors attended the safeguarding training session prior to full council on the 11th of July. 17 councillors returned the signed members safeguarding handout, so they've done it on their own. And 3 councillors have completed the e-learning module on Grow Zone.
Okay, thank you.
For staff
There's a few left.
to chase up, most of whom were missing from the full council meeting.
Okay, got it, understood. Councillor Prescott, is it on this?
Yeah, just a quick one. I did the training, but I didn't realise until after that there was a document that needed to be signed as well, which I did do, but it wasn't entirely clear. Maybe I'm just one of the stupidest councillors here. That would be quite possible, but I didn't realise. And when I did, I signed it, and that was that. So
I'm sure that's not true by Councillor Mansell. So thank you. Thank you, Councillor Prescott. I think it's a valid point. We can make that signpost more. I think there was an email, but probably more prompting if we're trying to get people to be compliant with this. Yeah. Cool. Okay. Thank you. Thanks very much. Okay, we shall move on then. Thank you to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee work programme, and Jeevan Mann to present.
Thank you, Chair. The work programme has been compiled following conversations with the Chair and Vice Chair and includes the annual report, items from the full plan and possible items for scrutiny. We currently have the following scrutiny items identified on the work programme, which is Appendix A. For November 2024, we have the Enterprise Portfolio Update. If councillors could advise any specific areas of interest for the update, that would be most helpful for when officers compile the report. Museum storage option is the second item on that. This report is intended to present an overview of the current pressures facing the storage of the district museum's collection and the options available for resolving these pressures. January 2025, crime and disorder matters. Possible topic updates where we are requesting is on violence against women and children. For February 2025, we're looking at planning and transport portfolio updates. Again, if councillors have anything in particular they would like to investigate here, please raise that. For March 2025, we are proposing health matters in the NHS. If we could have any specifics from councillors, that would be most helpful. There are a few candidate topics for scheduling. These include the waste contract mobilisation, digital transformation project updates, and LGA peer challenge report. With regards to task and finish groups, I've been working on a Microsoft form to enable members to raise topics for consideration. I'll circulate the link to members following this meeting. In the future, members will be able to access the link from a members' scrutiny web page, which is currently under development. There's several candidate task and finish group topics that have been proposed. Again, it would be most useful if you guys could debate these and discuss. One is officer recruitment and retention, impact on the council's grant policies, impact of the council tax reduction scheme, tackling homelessness in North Herts, review of the master planning process, effectiveness of Section 106 funding. Any suggested topics for the programme or task and finish groups will be greatly appreciated and can be raised in this meeting or to the chair or vice chair or by emailing the scrutiny officer mailbox, and I'll begin to investigate them with a view to begin canvassing people to present at future meetings. Finally, the LGA peer review. The peer review actions are now included in Appendix C of this report so that members can view the progress against actions. These actions have been discussed with the Chair and Vice Chair of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. That's all from me, Chair. Do you have any questions?
Thank you, Jeevan. Councillor Prescott.
It's not really a question. It was the you're asking for possible topics, and something that we've come up that's come up several times tonight and comes up quite regularly is this business of communicating the message of the council out to the residents, and the fact that the residents don't seem to be getting that message. Is that something we could take a look at, or is that not really for us to get our noses involved with?
I think it can be, yeah.
Well, it seems to be a
Absolutely.
big deal. I mean, if we're
Yeah.
doing good stuff and people don't realize we're doing good stuff, then the communications are where we need to look at.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
so I think it's an important topic. We can definitely look at it. We need to scope exactly what questions we're trying to address. But yeah, I think it's a good idea. Councillor Manser?
Thank you. Just with respect to the January meeting and having the constabulary here,
Yeah.
I'm certainly not diminishing the importance of violence against women and children, and it of course would be a very useful to have a briefing on that, but equally as well to have a briefing on overall crime trends in North Hertfordshire, because last year we did look at hate crime, and I think the year before that we may have looked at violence against women and girls.
Okay.
So if we could have sort of a more strategic view about actually what's going on across the district, and any trends that we're seeing, and then obviously in a short update on what the constabulary is doing against for violence against women and girls. I would potentially recommend that the LJ Peer Challenge, which is taking place in November, either that is scheduled in either January or February. I think it's really important that actually, and I know a lot of the administration's decisions are going to be stemming from that, and that there will be changes of which are recommended. So I think it's important that obviously we go and take a look at that. And with respect to the March meeting and health matters from the NHS, I think it would potentially be quite useful if we were to ask a representative of either one of the local trusts or the it's not clinical commissioning group, it's the ICB now, isn't it? Yeah, to come and potentially discuss about health provision from new development.
Okay.
Because that's obviously an issue of which was raised at the last full council meeting. And then I would definitely ask to prioritise the effectiveness of Section 106 funding, because obviously we've got a lot of planning reforms of which are coming forward, and it's important that whatever policies that we have in place with respect to that and the developments of which are taking place, our communities are going to see a benefit from that, and whether or not Section 106 is the most rigorous and appropriate regime to deliver that.
Thank you, Councillor Manser. Did you want to say
Yeah,
something?
it's just been highlighted to me that the peer review won't be ready by January if the work's been done in November. I don't know, but we can come back to you on that.
Perhaps we could pencil it for February. I think it's important that we have it here. It's on the kind of candidate topics, but yeah, I don't think we had a date when we put this together for when it was going to be. So yeah, we can put that in. I think the on the crime and disorder matters, I had suggested violence against women and girls. I wasn't aware that we'd done it 2 years ago because I wasn't a councillor then, but I remember it being discussed last year as being a good topic to review. I think what you suggested sounds good though. Yeah, okay. Councillor Wright Mason.
Yeah, I'd actually like to echo what Councillor Munster said at the end. I think the effectiveness of the Section 106 funding would be of great interest to me as well.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? No? Yeah.
I'd just like to say, with regards to the effectiveness of Section 106 funding, the scoping of that work needs to be taken forward by somebody, one of the councillors, and then I can look into it. So if someone would like to take that piece of work on.
Yeah.
Because if we are going to, make more use of task and finish groups, I think it would be in the interests of everyone if you would be able to explain what actually is involved if a member is going to be leading on a specific issue.
So essentially, we just need to understand the scope of the work. I don't know why this isn't working. Is it? Okay. Essentially, we need to understand the scope of the work. What are we intending to achieve by looking into a piece of work? What do you think the objectives are going to be? What are the timeframes associated to that? Who would need to be involved? It's perspective based, and once it's passed over to scrutiny, we can then go away to relevant officers, dig a bit deeper, and come back to yourselves and say, actually, this work looks like it's going to take this amount of time. These are the people that need to be involved. These are the other considerations that might not have been captured. And at that point, you can then decide, actually, is this a piece of work you want to take forward, or is there another piece of work that's being done already, and will this be addressed by that? I hope that makes sense. I can send you some more literature on that. Did I not do that?
Yeah, you might have done, but it was probably before the summer when everyone was otherwise occupied. Yeah, I think there's two ways we could approach that sort of topic. One of them is with a regular report like we do everything else. Task and finish group is a mechanism that we have available to us. I don't think there's been one for several years, and so we've maybe lost some of the art of doing it, but yes, it could be. But it is really about what we need to think about when scoping that is what are the key questions that we're trying to answer? What are the intended outcomes of doing it and using that mechanism to do it? But the documents that Jeevan's drafted that I've seen kind of lay that out quite well. So we'll share those, and then maybe if you've got some suggestions, we can consider those at the next meeting or ahead of that. Councillor Dennis.
Yes, thank you. So just briefly on the section 106, I've had concerns for a while that contributions are not necessarily being spent. There's pots of money that are sitting there at county council. There's also sort of allocations of land, for example, where a school was intended to be built and then a school still hasn't been built in that particular place. So what I've asked for at planning committee is for us to have those regular updates on what's happening with the 106 so that we've got some sight of it in that particular space. But I think that potentially a deeper dive and a look at all of the 106 contributions in sort of the global context within the council would potentially be quite beneficial and provide us with some assistance. And I'd be happy to provide support or a steer, not necessarily lead on stuff. I think other people can develop their skills in spaces, but I'm happy to help.
Thank you. Yeah, and I guess that is the thing about the task and finish group in particular. It's sort of more of a member-led deep dive into a topic as opposed to the sort of officer producer reports that we get now. Although there will obviously be officer support to the work as well. Councillor Wright.
Yeah, sorry, it was just a general question about what task and finish groups consisted of and what sort of time commitment was and whether they meet during the day, etc. But I think you've kind of already said that we haven't had one for a while. So
we're sort of
learning about
that.
So.
We've got some documents as to what good practice looks like. We've got some historic examples of ones that we've done. So I think we can share all of those again.
Okay.
Yeah, but to some extent we'll be feeling our way into whichever one we do first. So and learning lessons as we go on that as well. But I'm keen that we try to. Not that I can volunteer much of my own time to help with it, unfortunately, but we'll see. I think that may be a challenge for a lot of us, but we'll see how it goes.
There is going to be a lot of literature regarding this on the internet pages, which are currently being developed. But going forward, we will have we'll have case studies that are available. Hopefully, after the first one we do here, like Councillor Barnes said, we'll have lessons learned and we'll get better at it. But we do need to undertake one, see how it feels, and adjust it to meet our needs here. Yeah.
Sorry, Chair, just to a bit of background, we did actually have one arranged just before COVID for looking into communications specifically. It then got delayed. It had terms of reference and questions already sort of scoped out for that. I'm pretty sure it had been presented to Overview and Scrutiny and approved by Overview and Scrutiny, but then because of the time in between that, it was felt that it wasn't then relevant to continue with the task and finish group. So I'm sort of wondering if you're looking for somewhere to scope out, that may be a good start, given that there's already documentation behind it that could probably be repurposed for that use. I don't know the detail of it, but yeah, there's definitely stuff out there that we can look back on that may help address Councillor Prescott's issue and bring some experience to the committee. And it doesn't just have to be Overview and Scrutiny members on a task and finish group, it's any member. You just need to let your group leaders know whether you want to sit on it, and it should be people who have some expertise in that area if possible. So if you know anyone who's works in comms, then they'd be a great person to put on a task and finish group looking at communications in general. Hope that helped.
Councillor Prescott, do you have a...
Well, two things. Firstly, would it be possible for you to share that information, that historic stuff, and let us have a look at it? And secondly, and I'm always hesitant about volunteering for things before I know what the time commitment's going to be. But when I was a mere nipper on a on a scrutiny committee some years ago, we actually won a National Scrutiny Award for public engagement. So I do have some expertise. But I would be very happy to be part. I think it's very important, as I said, if we are genuinely doing good stuff, people need to figure out we need to figure out how to communicate that better. Because if anything, the report, the satisfaction report, it either says we're doing rubbish or we're doing great and nobody knows about it.
Yeah.
And I think it's probably the latter. I hope it is.
Thank you. Yeah, that's really good. Thanks for that offer. So I think what we'll do is we'll send out the documents that we talked about and maybe lay out a proposed process of how this comes together. It's important that we've got the right scrutiny of the process itself as well, but also that we are able to move it forward relatively quickly. And that's an answer.
I think I'm going to go and volunteer to be a guinea pig.
Okay.
So I would be more than happy to take forward the initial work with the Section 106 because I think it's something that needs to be done quite quickly, obviously with what's proposed planning wise. And I know that we've obviously heard some concerns from members and some engagement, so hopefully we'll be able to do that. Yeah. But I'm sure I'll be able to work with our fantastic scrutiny officer to take that forward.
Yeah, sure. Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? No. Okay, thank you. Well, that was all very encouraging. The recommendations are that the committee prioritises topics for inclusion in the work programme attached as Appendix A and where appropriate determines the high-level form and timing of scrutiny input. That the committee, having considered the most recent iteration of the forward plan as attached to Appendix B, suggests a list of items to be considered at its meetings in the coming civic year. And that the corporate peer challenge action plan as attached to Appendix C be considered. Again, I'll propose. Can I have a seconder, please? Yeah, Councillor Tyson. Thank you. Is there any debate? Any further debate? No? Okay, fine. Let's vote then, please.
Chair, that motion is carried.
Okay, thank you. So we'll move to item 15, which is the Overview and Scrutiny Committee Scrutiny Charter, which I'll present very briefly, following off the back of the Corporate Peer Challenge action to define what our scrutiny panels want to achieve. Also following the change of administration and the opportunity, the desire to do things a bit differently to how we've done them in the past. And also the feedback in the early stages of the formation of this committee following the training. I felt it was important that we try and write some of that down and document it. I was aided in that by the scrutiny officer and the colleagues here, and also by some of the feedback that several of you gave as well. So I'm hoping that we are able to adopt this charter tonight. If anybody wants to change anything, then please let us know. The intention in terms of what adoption means is that this is kind of published within the kind of scrutiny hub that Jeevan referred to earlier, but and also that we refer to it during the chair's announcements at each of the meetings, just to kind of remind ourselves what the principles of what we're here for. So that is the intent in terms of actually operationalizing the charter itself. Does anyone have any questions? No. Okay, thank you. All right, in that case, I'll move to the recommendation that the Overview and Scrutiny Committee adopt the Scrutiny Charter for scrutiny at North Arts Council attached as Appendix A. Again, I'll propose. And could I have a seconder? Yeah, Councillor Tyson again, thank you. Is there any debate? No. Councillor Manser.
I just want to say thank you very much, Stephen, for all of your work on this. It's a really, really good piece of work, and it's definitely going to mean that members of this committee, but equally as well, other members of council are far better informed as to what we actually do.
Okay, any further comments? Nope. All right, thank you. Let's move to the vote then.
Chair, that motion is carried.
Okay, thank you. And so our final item this evening is the Decisions and Monitorings Tracker. And again, Jeevan, to present.
Thank you, Chair. As advised at the ONS meeting on the 18th of June, we'll now utilise an alternative to the resolutions tracker, and this This is decisions and monitoring tracker. This is going to enable us to keep a full record of resolutions in one place and review and monitor them, but we'll only be presenting the open items at this meeting. So the following referrals and recommendations were made to Cabinet by the Chair of ONS on the 25th of June 2024, following the ONS meeting on the 18th of June. So item 4, leisure investment options, was a referral, and that's referral 2.3 from ONS was adopted by the Cabinet. Referral 2.4 was amended by Councillor Mick Debenham and adopted by Cabinet. Item 5, recommendation, Council Delivery Plan. Cabinet noted the recommendation. Item 6, recommendation, Key Performance Indicators 24-25. Cabinet approved the recommendation. These will now be marked as complete. The following referrals and recommendations were made to Cabinet on the 9th of July, following the extraordinary ONS meeting on 2nd of July. Councillor Barnes outlined the main discussion points raised and the reasons for the referrals and recommendations. Item 7, recommendation on the productivity plan. Cabinet considered and noted the recommendation. Item 8, recommendation on the waste contract. Cabinet noted and the recommendation. Item 9, recommendation on waste contract. Cabinet noted the recommendation. These will now be marked as complete. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? No. Okay. In that case, we'll move to recommendations, which are that the content of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee resolution be noted. The decisions and monitoring tracker be noted. Okay. Yeah, I'll propose that again. Could I have a second, please? Thank you, Councillor Claydon. Is there any debate? No. Okay. Then we'll move to the vote, please.
Chair, that motion's carried.
Thank you, James. And with that, we'll bring the meeting to a close. Thank you very much, everybody. Our next meeting of the committee is on the Tuesday, the 12th of November, 2024. Thanks very much.